I think running a business is very much like running a marathon. You are running on various types of terrain, and so you have to adjust your running strategy to those different types of terrains. I think one of the most important rules for a CEO is basically to tell it like it is. And I trust you to make a decision based on the current status of the company. You know your domain better than I do. That's why we hired you.
Hello and welcome to Run the Business, the weekly podcast that explores the place where running and leadership come together. We'll find out what running can teach us about leading, managing people, and generally being better in business. And we'll also try and answer that question, do runners make better leaders? I'm Anthony Gay, and today I'm joined by someone who spends his time with grandmasters. He's the CEO of Chessable and VP of Content at Play Magnus Group. Based in Barcelona and London, Chessable's mission is to make learning chess as fun and as efficient as possible. But before working full-time as a chess company executive, Geert was a musician and a vocalist in a band in the late 90s and noughties. Over the last few years, he's turned his passion for chess, along with his love for Chessable as a fan of the company, into a full-time career. Geert van der Velde, welcome to Run the Business.
Thank you very much, and that was very accurate.
How are you today, Geert?
Pretty good. Had a really good night's sleep and got some rest. It was a really crazy weekend in Madrid over the past weekend because in the chess world, every 2 years there's a world championship, and in the year leading up to that, there's this tournament called the Candidates Tournament, which is, for outsiders, that's what you would consider the Challengers Tournament, where one of the players ends up, either winning the tournament outright or qualifying by some tie-break system, and then that person gets to challenge the world champion to a one-on-one match for the world championship crown. And so that tournament had been taking place for the past couple of weeks and was now reaching its climax over the weekend in Madrid. There were a lot of side events going on and people going to see the action. So I since I don't live too far away from there, I took a train over and saw it firsthand.
And in terms of, what you do with chess, online learning with chess, and obviously I'm assuming the tournament like that is a physical version of chess. Is there any difference in the way people approach both versions of it?
Well, yes and no. I guess one of the main differences between online and what we refer to in the chess world is classical chess, right? Mm-hmm. Is that these tournaments that are online usually have a faster time control than the tournaments that take place in this kind of a setting where people are playing against each other over the board. Although we do also have faster time control events over the board where people are meeting each other face to face. But it's a lot less common. So most of these online events, the games are much faster. And then in what we call these classical events, the average time of a chess game is probably between 3 and 4 hours, and sometimes it goes up to 7 or 8 hours. So the classical chess is a bit slower pace and has a different atmosphere than online.
Okay, makes sense. And I want to talk a little bit more about chess specifically in a second, but firstly, this podcast is about the relationship between business and running. Firstly, about running. When did you last go running?
I went running 5 days ago, I think. I didn't do much running while I was in Madrid because we were walking around with heavy camera equipment and running from location to location. So I had wanted to get a run in on Sunday morning, but then I ended up getting to bed about 3 a.m. and not really getting up in time. So it's been 5 days or something.
And do you have a regular route in Barcelona that you like to do?
So I live outside of Barcelona. I live in a small town called Sant Cugat, which is like 20 minutes from Barcelona. And that's where I do all of my running. My house is on top of a hill in an area that's very hillish. So I do most of my running is trail running on the hills of this park called the Collserola Park. And it's beautiful. It's like lots of small trails. It's very technical terrain, but really fun to run. And you can just keep going forever if you want to. And in fact, I realized last year around November or something that there's actually an ultra trail marathon that happens right in my backyard that like goes across all those trails that I've been running and training. So it was kind of funny because one Sunday morning I just happened to run up my regular route up the mountain, and all of a sudden there was all these runners, and I was like, what's going on? And then I realized that it was part of their ultra trail.
And did it make you feel like you wanted to get involved in that at some point?
It's been a goal of mine to run one of those, and in fact, I just had my birthday. My wife gave me some private lessons with an ultra trail coach. So that's a long-term goal of mine to eventually run one of those. But after the marathon I ran last year, I got a little injured, so I had to scale back the work and focus on recovery. But I'm back to running 3 times a week now, and hopefully I can increase that to 5 times a week, so I can do the amount of kilometers that are necessary to build that kind of stamina.
You got to get the kilometers in the tank, haven't you, when you're going to go for those long runs?
Yeah, I've been reading up on this stuff, and it's just, I think it's just mainly a really large time commitment. Like obviously you have to do some strength training and work on your speed and your technique and stuff, but I think mainly you just have to kind of grind and just be willing to go longer.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the marathon that you completed. Just tell us which one was that?
I ran the Barcelona Marathon.
Oh, wonderful.
And it was very nice. It's a really nice parkour. You go by all the big landmarks, and the atmosphere is very festive. I'm not a very fast runner, so I did my run in the pack in the middle with all of the other runners. But I had a nice finish. It was a really great experience.
Was it a hot day?
No, it was okay because the marathon was in November, so the temperature in Barcelona around that time is just really nice. It was quite cool. And it starts early in the morning, so I think I finished by like 11:30 in the morning or something, and it was sunny. Like, it was like perfect running weather, to be honest.
Sounds lovely. To give us a little background before we sort of get into some of the specifics of the conversation, tell us about how somebody who was in a band, I think you're the vocalist in a metal band, wasn't it? How do you get from there into a career in a chess company? I mean, what's the journey like?
Yeah. So short version. In my teens, my late teens and early 20s, I was screaming in a metal band, hardcore band, an American one and that one toured the world. How I joined that band is a story in itself. Then after that, during my college years, like when I was in university and stuff, I started a new project, and that was more of a singer-songwriter, acoustic singer-songwriter focus, where I sang. That was my career as a musician. The hardcore punk stuff, I would say, is kind of like was the teen adventure, and then I kind of became a professional in my mid-20s, and I did that until my mid-30s, and I had held all sorts of positions, from booking agent to manager to publisher to whatever, and I was always writing my own music, but I was always combining it with other roles in the music industry. So I learned a little bit about everything from copyright law to publishing to licensing to, all these things, as well as like project management. Like, when you work for a festival or something, you have a lot of people to coordinate, and you have a lot of different stakeholders that are interested, sponsorships, all this stuff. So I had a lot of different roles as a musician / music professional. And yeah, the chess was always there in the background. I started playing chess as a hobby, something that I did in the van. Like I would bring my little chessboard and my books with me. And when you're sitting in a van touring across the United States, driving 10 hours to the next venue, you have a lot of time to kill, and it gets really boring. So I love chess, and that kept me occupied. And then I would just basically play anybody who would show up at the venue, and like sometimes people would show up to play me, or friends or something that we'd met, and that's just, so that was kind of like my fun hobby. And then eventually, through various things coming together in my life, I ended up working for Chessable as one of the early members of the team. I think I was the 3rd full-time team member, like 5th or 6th in the total team, and then that company grew, and we scaled, and a few years down the line, here we are.
And when in this story, and it's fascinating to hear you describe how you worked through the music industry, and then how chess came into your life. Where does running fit in this? When did you consider yourself, hey, I'm a runner? So
I was at a very young age. I had a lot of energy, and my parents just wanted me to have an outlet. So they took me to track and field club. And I turned out to be pretty good at running. And so I've always kind of stuck with that. So from the time that I was like 7 years old until probably my late teens, I was running track and field and getting some local medals. And I even made it to like Dutch national championships a few times. And then when I went to the United States, I ran track at the high school there. I did like an exchange student year and I ran track there and I made it to the varsity team and I made it to the starting team also on the relays and stuff. So I was never a long distance runner at that point. I was always like mid distance, but I enjoyed the long distances more than the short distances because I was always less nervous for them. Like for sprints and especially like the mid distances, I'm so competitive and I would just get so nervous that I didn't enjoy the lead up to it so much. But long distances, for me, always felt like, oh, if I have a bad start, then I'll catch up later. And like, it was more of a journey. And that's always kind of been the case for me. I kind of like that long grind where you get in that empty head zone and you can just keep going.
And is that something, this podcast is obviously about how running might help people in business and leadership. And you mentioned that empty head zone and the space that it gives you. Does that work for you?
Yeah.
Is that something that one of the reasons that you run?
Yeah, absolutely. My wife can tell you that if I'm not running, that I get pretty grumpy sometimes. I just need to run and like clear my head and get that energy out, but also get, you come back and then you kind of like feel like everything's okay. I just ran for 2 hours and my body aches and I'm tired, but then it puts things into perspective for me again. So I like it both for the challenge, but also for the feeling of it and obviously it's good for your health. So that's an additional nice benefit to it.
And are there any specific examples that you can think of where a particular run or going out there on a run, gave you a lesson in something or you came up with a solution to a problem and that something you were able to transfer into your work? Does that happen for you?
So I think more on a, not specifically maybe, but more general, I think running a business is very much like running a marathon. Like sometimes you have to sprint to get a result, right? But overall, what you're trying to do when you're running a business is you want to have a long breath. You want to be around 5, 10, 15 years from now. So it's about finding pace, knowing when to accelerate, knowing when to slow down, knowing when to refuel, knowing when to take a break. Also knowing like what kind of terrain am I on and what does that require of me to conserve energy, or maybe I can speed up in this area here where I can gain some ground on someone or etc. So there's a lot of these parallels, I think, between, at least for me, between long distance running and specifically trail running, I think, and running a business. Because in trail running, and I'm assuming in the if I ever make it to be ready to run an ultra trail, you are running on various types of terrain, and so you have to adjust your running and walking and climbing strategy to those different types of terrains, and that also means that you have to have different fueling strategies, like people finding and helping you along the way. So it's about finding partners. All those things, I think, translate also to a business strategy, because business is very much about building relationships with people and working with teams and making sure that everybody understands what's required of them at a specific time that the company is in.
Would it be right to say chess is now bigger than it's ever been in history? I mean, what do you see where it sort of fits in the world at the moment?
I would say chess is now not as big as it ever was, because I think it was at its peak probably last year in February or March, on the tail end of when The Queen's Gambit was just everywhere, the TV show by Netflix.
Yeah.
That was insane. Like, I'd never seen anything like that before. Obviously, I mean, I'd only been in the chess world as a professional for a couple of years, but I had been following chess and what was going on with chess, and we hadn't seen anything like that in chess. So that definitely was, I think, the peak of the popularity. But the interesting thing is, I think that chess, unlike other sports and things which have seen boost from the kind of like mainstream breakthrough of their sport, it leveled out pretty well. Like, it stayed. A lot of people stayed in chess. So that's been really unique. And I think that's a combination of Netflix, streaming becoming more popular, chess streamers getting some mainstream recognition, Obviously, also it helps that we have a world champion who's very media friendly and just has a great story and who's been around for 10 years, winning the last 5 world championships. So all those things combined, but it's definitely at one of the most popular points in time.
Fantastic. You mentioned the Queen's Gambit, and that was one of my questions around the impact of that show. Could you metrics is something that I'm sure is very important to you on many levels, and in running is something which we talk about how we measure smartwatches and all that kind of stuff these days that make it so easy to measure our performance. Could you see instant impact from when the Queen's Gambit was on TV to people googling you or logging into the Chessable platform?
Yeah, for sure. Like, it was like you can just go back into the traffic and the amount of signups and all this stuff, and you can just say, oh, this is when Queen's Gambit was released. Like, it was overnight.
Wow. And on that subject of metrics, when you run, how important are goals to you, or is running? You mentioned the space that it gives you. Do you kind of run free without any tech with you, or do you like to measure and have goals to achieve?
Kind of both. I like running for running's sake, but I also really like, making a training plan, fitting my runs in. I measure everything. I track everything with various things. I have a running watch. I have my apps. I've experimented with various wearables. I've worn CGMs to see what my glucose was doing during my runs, and I use that information for the marathon and like use it to inform myself on my fueling strategy. I've worn wearables to track my heart rate, to see what my recovery is, all this kind of stuff. So I like all that stuff, and I think it's really fun. But I can also, like, for the past couple of months, I've actually just been running without anything, and then I'm just running for fun. But every once in a while, I'll pick a race or something, a goal that I want to work towards, and then I can make that plan, and I make my own Excel sheet with my running plan, and then, I put the asterisks behind every run that I finish. I put my times in and put my mileage in and keep track of that stuff.
And was that something that, thinking of business, is that something that, are you naturally somebody who is into the detail of goals and metrics, or did, that come from your business, side of who you are? Or I'm just trying to understand kind of what was, is it a natural thing for you to want to sort of see the data?
For me, it's always the other way around. I have an idea, and then I wonder if what I'm thinking corresponds to a reality. Mm-hmm. Basically, what I'm essentially trying to do is falsify myself all the time. Is my idea correct? Is this correct? Is my intuition that this is a good thing correct? And can I find something in the data that tells me that this is wrong? Because if it's wrong, then I need to adjust and change my course. But if it's right, then we just need to do more of it. And so I kind of constantly go back and forth between having an idea, setting something up, seeing if it can be falsified. If it can be falsified, well, then, the takeaway can be this was just a bad idea, or the takeaway can be, if you look at the data, like, oh, actually, there's something here, but we need to change these and these things, and maybe then we'll get a better outcome. And sometimes it's just a bad idea, and that's also okay. I'm fully okay to fail and just try something new all the time. But I think that's what it is. I'm not like a math guy per se, but I like honesty, and I think numbers keep you honest. And
is that in your running? I know you mentioned you sometimes like running tech free, and other times you'll measure your running. How ambitious are you in the goals that you set? And this is a general question, not just at you. How, in terms of ego, when we run, sometimes we can be overconfident and take things on that are too big for us, maybe at that point in time. But yeah. So when you go out running, how confident are you, and how big are the goals that you set yourself?
Well, we could take my marathon. That was my first marathon last year. I attempted to train and run one many times before, but that was the first time I actually managed to do it. And I actually think it's because I had a much shorter preparation time, which I actually suffered the consequences of later, because I think I overtrained in too short of a period of time. But I only took about 9 weeks to prepare for the marathon. I had been running and hiking a lot, but probably in hindsight, starting to train in 8 weeks and going to 5 times a week of running and keeping that up and increasing the mileage and everything probably didn't help with the hamstring injury that I kind of had after that. But in any case, my approach was very much see what I can do in the first 4 weeks, and then establish like, okay, this is probably the goal time that I should have, and then I trained for that, and then when it came to race time, I had tempered my own expectations, and I told myself, okay, I'm just gonna go run a 3.5 hour marathon, nothing crazy, just run it in 3.5 hours, stay with the pack, and so that was the guy with the flag that was running ahead, the pacer, that was the group I was following. But then I realized I was on this 4:20 pace the whole time, and that I just wasn't happy following that group. So I passed them up, and then I started kind of running towards the 3:15 finish group. And then about 10K or 15K before the end of the marathon, I realized like, I'm also not happy running their pace. I should just pass them up too. And so I ended up finishing in 3:13, and so I guess like I kind of adjusted my ambition as I passed the 30K mark, and I realized like I can do this. I can keep this up until the end of the race. But of course, secretly in the back of my mind, I was thinking, I can do this. I should be able to run under 3 hours if I keep training and doing this. So when I finished the marathon, I instantly was thinking, now I'm going to train for sub 3. But I try to keep myself honest too. So I was kind of happy with the result because I tempered my own expectations.
Well done. And I think we all have those voices, don't we? From the different sides coming at us. The one that is, yeah, you can do this. This is, just keep going. And then the other one that's, is this too much? Is this taking us in a different direction? And it sounds like, in the business side of things, the last few years has been, moved forward so quickly, and adjusting, reviewing as you go along. That's so important, isn't it? To keep taking a check on where things are at, and are we going in the right direction? Are we still true to the purpose that we set out and wanted to do? How often are you, checking in, reviewing things in the world of Chessable?
Well, that's a nice segue because we just had to go through a big reorganization. And we had to let go of about 25% of our staff compared to last year, December, when we were at the peak of everything. But I think the current macroeconomic climate kind of shows that things can change very quickly. And definitely Chessable was affected by that in various ways. So we had to change our plan and had to adjust our strategy to what the current environment is telling us is necessary. So yeah, we can change, and I can change and adapt to new realities pretty quickly if necessary, even if painful. I think that's also something that maybe also kind of ties into running, because sometimes you can just have you can start out feeling absolutely amazing for the first 20K or something, and then you're like, oh man, I could go on for another 20 and I could finish this so easily. And then suddenly 25K, like you've only run 5 more and you just feel miserable. You're like, whoa, what just happened? I feel awful. I need to change, or sometimes just need to stop. I had that a couple times during training where I was like flying first 15K. I'm like, oh man, I feel so great. And then like I hit 17K, 2K later, and I was just like, I need to stop. I can't do anymore. So sometimes that just happens. You can't win them all. Sometimes you have to accept, the loss, as they say.
And you said being honest with yourself and being having some perspective is so important to do that, to do what you describe.
Yeah.
This podcast is about the parallels between running and business, but I've got to ask, what about chess? Chess seems to be something which people draw metaphors, similes with business a lot. Do you see those, or what's your perspective on chess as a game, as a pastime, and what people in business might learn from that?
That's a really interesting question that I actually haven't ever been asked for some reason. Well, chess is a game of objectivity in the sense that there's a few different ways that once the game develops, right, that a game could continue to develop, because it's not a foregone conclusion. Even if people were playing the objective best moves, there are certain branches within a chess game where a player still has the freedom to choose a path, right? So you could be on move 15 in a game, and then there could be 3 good options to proceed, and that leads to the rest of the game. And obviously also players make mistakes. They choose suboptimal moves and etc. So in that regard, chess is a game of kind of brutal truth. And chess players tend to be brutally honest, especially about their own play. Top players will make zero excuses for their games. They're very used to being, after a game, being asked, oh, what happened? What went wrong? And they can be just absolutely brutally honest about their own play. I think that brutal honesty is something that's really valuable for a leader of a company if you can manage to take the brutal out and make it, something that someone can learn from and listen to. Or even if you can be brutally honest with yourself as a leader, but you can communicate the honesty of that to, the people that you work with. I think one of the most important rules for a CEO is basically to tell it like it is. Like, this is the business, this is where we are. You can trust me to tell you at all times where we stand, and I trust you, one of my team members, to make a decision based on the current status of the company. I have a better overview of what's going on big picture, but you know your domain better than I do. That's why we hired you. So you need to inform me when you see something, and I can tell you what's going on big picture if I see something. And that's the kind of like the dynamic there. And I think that's very similar to chess in that, you have this army in front of you and these pieces need to move in a certain direction. You're setting up a strategy, but it could very much be that in the moment, in a particular situation or a particular position on the chessboard, the big strategy has to be relinquished in favor of a short-term tactic, which will then give you a winning position long-term.
That's fascinating. It's really fascinating to hear you describe that. And I guess the feedback that you get in chess is instant when you're in a game, which is a little bit different to maybe business and maybe running as well. Because if somebody is making a move in a game, I assume you can, if you're good, you can kind of read where things are going and you get a sense of where things are moving straight away.
Yeah, but also keep in mind, top players make mistakes too, right? So the interesting thing about chess is there's a lot going on under the surface that you don't realize until like another top player is pointing out all of the different ideas to you. And then, like they'll go over the game, they'll show you, look, this person didn't play this because of these and these and these and these consequences. But for example, sometimes in a game, both sides will miss something and then they will both finish the game. Maybe they will go to a post-game interview, and then the commentator, who has access to a supercomputer with like all these analysis engines, can tell them, hey, here's where you guys both missed this. And then those grandmasters will be like, oh my God, oh wow. So there is this kind of like this element to chess still where both sides can miss something, and then you're like, oh wow, oh, I had no idea. And that's very similar to business. Is like both. You can be in competition with another company and be very focused on what you're both doing, but maybe both of you miss an opportunity, right?
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Switching back to running for a moment and the the number of runs you've done over your life, is there a run that you can recall where it was a perfect setting and it was your energy was great? And there was just something special about their run. Anything, over the years that sticks in your mind?
Yeah, that was last year. I did, I was running and training, and I was doing most of my training in the hills on trails. And that was kind of on purpose because I figured if I can run my kind of goal times and keep my goal paces in the hills on difficult technical terrain, then surely I must also be able to, do that on flat terrain in the city. So I think I ran about 80% of my training, or maybe 60% of my training, 70, somewhere there, on hilly terrain and technical terrain. And I had one particular run where I think I was around the half marathon distance. And I ran it slightly slower than what my fastest time in training was, but probably 70% of that run was on hilly technical terrain. And I just felt invincible. I finished the whole thing. I ran home and I like calmly walked up to the gate, hit my watch, and then I was like, oh man, that was amazing. And I didn't even the next day I didn't even have any soreness or anything. So that's when I knew the training had kind of paid off a little bit. That was a really good run.
And do you share those runs with, and do you share your enthusiasm for running with your colleagues? Do they run as well, or is this your sort of secret thing that you do for yourself?
I definitely shared with my colleagues, and I've inspired a few of them to run, which is nice. And fortunately, if some other folks in the company, like I'm the CEO of Chessable, but Chessable is part of a larger group of companies called Play Magnus Group, and the CEO of Play Magnus Group, Andreas, is also a runner. So we share this running, and we compare the things that we do in training. One of them actually ran her first half marathon not too long ago, and she was asking me for advice on certain things, and I kind of helped her out a little bit, like helped her make a training schedule and showed her a few things that she could do and how she should train, and etc. And I'm not an expert, but I have a decent amount of experience by having attempted to run a marathon over the past like 10 years, 4 times or something. I've gone through that process a whole bunch, so I was able to give her some tips.
Oh, good for you. A few more questions to go before we finish. I really appreciate your time on this.
Sure.
Running aside, can you name a business tool, an app, or a person, something that you couldn't do without in business?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think there's 2 that we use in Chessable a lot. We actually, in Chessable, we use a messaging alternative to Slack that is called Twist, which is a great messenger alternative to Slack. Our whole company is on Twist because it's a little less intrusive, and it has a few more features that I really enjoy that are a little bit better than Slack's. I find I also use Slack for intra-group communication with other companies who do use Slack, but we use Twist. And it's nice because you can group conversations and open up threads and stuff which are separate inside a channel, and it's not so intrusive. Doesn't bombard you with notifications and red dots. So I really like that one. And then we also, for task management, we use Asana, which is a really wonderful tool which allows us to track our progress, set KPIs, and track people's workloads and such. And those 2 are really helpful for our company. I would say those are 2 big ones.
Oh, that's great insight. And I share the Slack thread pain that you mentioned there. It can be difficult to track conversations. Flipping that question around, business aside, what's your favorite bit of running kit or accessory that you can't do without?
I like all the wearables. I like the running. I have tons of different running shoes, but honestly, I think the one thing that I learned over time is that just having really good running socks is just so nice. I have like 20 pairs of the same socks that I wear them all the time, and that's I guess like I think it's called Danish Endurance. Really lovely brand, very light, and those have been probably the biggest one. Obviously with shoes, there's always new technologies and new cushioning and new all this grip and whatever. And there's always lighter clothes and whatever, but just having a pair of good socks that don't give you any blisters, that's good stuff.
I hear you. And there's something there, isn't there, about that comfortable structure, the habit of doing, once you find something that works for you, just stick with it, because there's no point in changing too often. If there's something, whether it's a shoe, a sock, or a bit of clothing, whatever, go with it.
Yeah, although there's some science now. They've done some research on shoes in which they recommend that you don't run using the same shoe and even the same model of shoe all the time. They would say that, like, I guess like the latest is that you should, let's say you're a long distance runner, that you should train on various different models of shoes throughout the week. Yeah. Because it helps your body kind of like stay flexible with the way that the different shoe models, types, and such kind of respond. So it keeps you, I guess like the main issue is if you always run in the same shoes, even if it's the same model shoes, your feet and all this stuff, it will adjust to this thing. And especially if you have, let's say, not perfect technique, or you have like, some other issues there, then it exacerbates the problem. Whereas if you run on different types of shoes, I guess it helps.
That's an interesting one. Okay, we'll check that one out. That's good advice. Music or no music? As a former musician, is music something you need when you're running, or do you steer clear of it?
Always. I if it's on long runs, I can consume a vast quantity of podcasts, especially in the first hour. After that, my attention drifts. I can't focus on anything. So then I just have loud stuff on, mostly metal. Yeah, sometimes some hip hop. I like energetic music when I run. I listen to lots of different stuff, but when I'm running, I think there was this one band last year when that was like basically my marathon music and my entire training. Like I think I got 1,600 hours worth of this one band that I listened to, and I think probably 80% of it was just because of my running.
And can you tell us who they were?
It's a very obscure Danish, Dutch, atmospheric black metal band. I'm not sure I should go any further than that. Like if people want to look it up, sure. It's called Dødsrit. It's Dodsrit. Very obscure. Not a lot of people listen to this stuff, but it was like the perfect record for me. The record is called Mortal Coil, and it's like 4 songs. They're all like 10 minutes long, and it's just incessant pounding, and it's like the perfect RPM for me to run to. So I like that kind of stuff, so I can just zone out, and it's kind of droning, and I not much variation, but good. Yeah, I like that stuff.
And what's the sound of, you mentioned your wonderful runs in the hills up near where you live. Mm-hmm. What if you're not listening to anything, is there a sound that accompanies you on those runs? What's the sound of the environment up there?
It's just so many birds. It's beautiful. There's it's very rich in nature. There's there's actually snakes too, so you have to watch out on the trails. But it's snakes and boars, and then just lots and lots of birds. It's just so rich in bird song, and especially early in the morning, if the sun's not up yet and you're running, and kind of like, because I like to go early, then it's just amazing. You really have the dawn chorus, like that's a real thing. It's just so beautiful.
Sounds amazing. You mentioned running early in the morning. Do you structure your day in a consistent way so that running has a certain space? You have meetings at a certain time. You make decisions at a certain time, or is it just sort of more free flow? How does a typical day in your life go?
Fairly structured. I like to have all of my important meetings between 10 and 3, because I find that's when I have the most focus. So I don't like having a critical meeting at like 5 in the afternoon, because I'm fried. I just can't make any good decisions. My self-control goes down. My emotional regulation is less. So I don't like having critical meetings or like really important decision-making processes at the end of the day. I like to have them before, like basically up until lunch, or maybe like an hour after lunch or 2. But then it needs to be done. And I like running in the morning because it kind of like anchors my day. So I prefer to go out early in the morning, get my run in, and then kind of I've already accomplished something, and it feels good.
Final question, Geert. What advice would you give to anybody in business or in a leadership role considering getting more active and specifically taking up running?
You don't have to have a goal right away. I know a lot of, especially leaders in companies, are very goal-oriented and very driven, and I am too. I like to set goals. I like to work towards them. It motivates me to finish something and to complete a task, and etc. But if you can make the habit of running a goal in itself, you will be rewarded. And I think that's probably the one thing I would tell anybody, that you don't have to start loving running, but like my wife, for example, she runs almost every day, but she runs a very short distance, and her goal is just to keep that up. And I think that's also a very valuable thing in itself.
Habits are so important, aren't they? If you can just start doing things, get into routines, they turn into big things.
Yeah, exactly. Compounding.
Geert van der Velde, thank you so much for your time, and thanks for being a guest on Run the Business.
Thank you so much for the great questions.
Thanks again to Geert van der Velde for being today's guest on Run the Business. So what am I taking away from that conversation? Metrics being so important to get better at running, and how that applies to business as well. Goals are crucial, aren't they? But at the same time, he talked about the importance of running for fun, something that comes through in a lot of the conversations we're having. Mixing it up, changing things, just keeps you fresh, just getting out there and clearing your mind. Geert talked about falsifying himself, having ideas and theories to test and see if they work. A great phrase that he said was, numbers keep you honest. And I love that. And I loved also talking about the similarities between chess and business. Not strictly what this podcast is about, but the idea of having options at the beginning of the game, choosing strategies and updating them as you go along. Geert talked about chess as a game of brutal truth. Zero excuses from chess players if things go wrong. Can you imagine if we got that in business and we were able to transfer some of that into the workplace? The idea of being brutally honest with our people and telling it like it is, but in a constructive way, building trust that allowed that transaction to happen. Trust that for Geert was coming from giving people the space to do their jobs. He talked a little bit about short-term opportunities versus the big picture and how those things sort of fit together as well. I actually think I need to listen to this one again to fully appreciate some of what Geert was talking about, because there was a lot in that conversation for me. Either way, I feel like getting my chess set out after that conversation. I don't know about you, but I'm not sure if I should admit it actually, but the only chess set that we have in this house is a Winnie the Pooh chess set. It's out there. If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, please rate it positively, spread the word, and share it wherever you can. It really, really does help. Run the Business is a Real 2 Media production with thanks to Chris Kelly and Anna Harding for helping make it possible. A chess quote to finish today: you may learn much more from a game that you lose than from a game that you win. You will have to lose 100 games before becoming a good player. Whether it's chess, running, or business, that mentality applies to so much in life, doesn't it? I'm Anthony Gay, and until next time, keep running and keep chasing your goals.